From KVUE News in Austin, you're watching Texas This Week with Ashley Goudeau.
Good Sunday morning. Texas lawmakers will return to the state capitol tomorrow for a third special session. Let's get to the three things you need to know in Texas politics. Texas senators and representatives are set to gavel in at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, getting to work on the governor's agenda. Work on the big item on the call, redistricting, has been happening for months now, with both chambers holding committee hearings. Lawmakers will also decide how the state spends nearly $16 billion in federal COVID relief dollars from the American Rescue Plan. Governor Greg Abbott is also asking lawmakers to pass legislation deciding whether governmental entities can mandate COVID vaccines, and if so, what exemptions should apply, enhance dog cruelty laws, and require public school students play on sports teams according to their biological sex at birth. Once again, state leaders are at odds with the federal government over the Texas-Mexico border. On Thursday, Governor Abbott directed DPS and the Texas National Guard to shut down 6 points of entry along the border. Hours later, a change. The governor releasing this statement, quote, 6 hours after U.S. Customs and Border Protection requested help from Texas to close ports of entry and secure the border, the Biden administration has now flip-flopped to a different strategy. Meanwhile, on Friday, Governor Abbott signed a bill passed by the legislature allocating another $1.8 billion in state funding for border security. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has another challenger in the primary election. Fort Worth Representative Matt Krause is joining the crowded field of Republicans looking to unseat the embattled state attorney general. For the fourth time this year, Texas lawmakers will convene under the Pink Dome, this time to work on another one of the governor's agendas. James Barragan, political reporter for the Texas Tribune, joined me to look at the issues on the call. The third special session is about to get underway. Of course, the big item on the call is redistricting. The work to draw new political maps has been going on for quite some time now, a few months. But I want you to give us some insight on what's at stake considering Texas's changing demographics.
Yeah, I mean, what's really at stake is, one, the political lives of many of the lawmakers that we know have represented the state. But the second thing, and really what I think is most important, is how fair of a representation are Texas voters going to get when the maps are redrawn. We know that lawmakers like to protect their incumbency. They like to protect their districts that they've already won, and like to keep as comfortable of a race as they can. But what's really more important is, will voters be able to have an option to choose the candidate of their choice? And that's really what this is all about.
You know, when we think about the big G word, gerrymandering, it's just one of those things that I think a lot of folks have come to expect and feel as though it just is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Over the last decade, we had a big fight in federal courts over the previous redistricting session in 2011. And that legal battle lasted up until 2018, 2019. Is technically still going on today because they're fighting about attorney's fees. But in those legal cases, the courts found that the state of Texas had intentionally discriminated against voters of color by packing them into districts where their votes would be diluted, or cracking them by breaking them up into different districts so that their vote wasn't as powerful. And that happened to both Black voters and to Hispanic voters. And people of color have driven the biggest part of the state's growth over the last 10 years. So one of the big questions is, will those gains be reflected in some opportunity districts for voters of color?
You know, another big item is allowing lawmakers to have a say in how the state will spend nearly $16 billion in federal COVID relief funding. What ideas are on the table right now to how to use that money?
I think for the Republican majority, a lot of the talk that I've been seeing is about putting some more money into the state's unemployment insurance fund so that it doesn't tax businesses that have had to lay off workers to replenish that fund. Instead, they'd like to use some of those federal COVID relief funds to just plug that money in there so that there wouldn't be an adverse effect on employers that have had to let employees go during the pandemic. I think what Democrats would like to see is more spending on public health, more spending on infrastructure, more spending on, reimbursing schools for some of the costs that they've had. I think that there is, some of those are pretty bipartisan issues, and I think that there are some Republicans who'd be willing to go there. But I think the number one priority there is going to be on reimbursing the unemployment insurance fund.
The last item that I'm going to bring up that's on the call is particularly interesting to me because of the language that's in the call, and it has to do with vaccine mandates. Governor Abbott has been very vocal about not supporting vaccine mandates. He banned an executive order just this week. His campaign came out with an ad attacking President Joe Biden for vaccine mandates, and initially on a previous call, he wanted legislation that banned vaccine mandates. He's now, in my opinion, kind of stepping that back a little bit by saying and putting on the call, letting lawmakers decide whether vaccine mandates are appropriate for cities and local governments, and if they are, what exemptions should apply. Are we seeing him pivot at all on this issue?
Well, according to the experts that I've talked to, they're seeing the same thing. They're seeing him back off a little bit. And I think what I've heard from people is that with kids going back to school, that is a bad look if you've got what we have been seeing recently, which is school districts shutting down, whole schools shutting down for a day or for a couple of weeks because of the number of COVID cases that there are there. And when you're in that situation, it's very hard to be the person pushing the vaccine mandates. And so I think he's taken a step back, washed his hands of it a little bit here, so to say, in this session, and left it up to the legislators so that if something happens that goes awry and COVID all of a sudden picks up, especially with kids, which are such like a sensitive subject, parents love their kids. He can sort of say, hey, it wasn't me. I left it up to the hands of the legislators, and the legislators took X, Y, or Z action. So I think there's definitely some sort of removal of himself, which I think is probably a smart political move. Now, the interesting thing will be to see what the legislators actually decide to do, because they're facing the same dilemma, right?
And now the last word. Governor Greg Abbott continued to face backlash this week about a comment he made last week vowing to eliminate rape in Texas. Here's what he said.
Texas will work tirelessly to make sure that we eliminate all rapists from the streets of Texas by aggressively going out and arresting them and prosecuting them and getting them off the streets. So goal number one in the state of Texas is to eliminate rape.
Some of the more pointed criticism he's faced isn't in response to the rather ambitious goal to eliminate a certain crime altogether, though there is plenty of that. There are Texas rape victims who say the comment is a slap in the face because while the governor is vowing to eliminate rape and prosecute rapists, years-old rape kits are sitting on shelves waiting to be tested, while rapists are presumably out there, potentially attacking other Texans. This problem of untested rape kits is not unique to Texas, but it's also not a new problem. In 2011, Texas became the second state in the country to pass a law requiring newly collected rape kits be sent to a lab for testing within 30 days. At that time, some of Texas's largest cities had thousands of rape kits that had not even been sent off for testing. And in 2013, the New York Times reported DPS had an estimated 20,000 untested rape kits. Over the past 10 years, Texas lawmakers have passed several laws and allocated millions of dollars to try to eliminate the backlog. But as of this past August, I'm talking just last month, DPS staff tell me there are still 5,298 untested sexual assault kits in Texas. More than 3,500 of them are still in the hands of law enforcement agencies across the state, and about 1,700 of them are in the DPS crime lab. But get this, of those 1,700, 635 of them were submitted before September of 2019. So they've been sitting on the shelf for more than 2 years. This is not an attack on law enforcement. We understand they are putting in work. It's just, these are not just numbers. Each of those kids represents a Texan who suffered an unimaginable attack. A Texan who had something invaluable taken from them. A Texan waiting for justice. And sadly, the number is only expected to grow. The Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network analyzed crime data from the Department of Justice and reports an American is sexually assaulted every 68 seconds. So just in this time that I've been talking to you, at least another 2 sexual assaults have happened. Eliminating rape is something we all can get behind, about as much as we could get behind eliminating all crime. It's a lofty goal, something the governor wants to do, but what we need to do, perhaps, is help the thousands of rape survivors who bravely reported the crime against them, endured evidence collection from their already violated bodies, only to be shelved. That's the last word, and this has been Texas This Week.